All right, I am going to get going on this, and hopefully they'll click in here because most of our time with them, they can speak at the end. And I want to welcome everybody to our City Council Legislative Meet and Greet on Thursday, January 7th, 2021. Thank goodness we are out of 2020. Due to meeting accessibility pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 20-25, the city is unable to provide an in-person location for the public to listen to the virtual meeting this evening. To watch the meeting live, please visit the city website, www.sammamish.us/TV21, our YouTube channel, or Comcast Channel 21 within Sammamish only. Meeting videos are available the day after the meeting on the city website, YouTube, or Comcast Channel 21. Welcome again to our legislative meet and greet. And then we're going to have discussion with our council members after, because we want to get right down to the meat with you guys and have introductions and kind of let you guys, since some of you have to leave right away, kind of get going right off the bat. So why don't we start with kind of letting you guys do some introductions? Or Luke, do you want to have you start introductions with everybody? How would you like to handle that?
I think we only need to introduce the electeds as far as I'm concerned, yeah. And the rest of us can just...
Exactly. We can do the council at the end. So why don't we start with the electeds from, the 5th District?
I'm Mark Mullet.
Hi, Lisa Callan.
Great.
Rep Bill Ramos.
And it is good to see everybody. And then let's go over to our next district. And our 41st district.
Hi, Rep Tana Sen here.
Hi, Representative Mi-Lin Tai.
And then our last district.
The 45th.
Yep.
Larry, that's you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Larry Springer from the 45th.
I'm Katinga, State Senator from the 45th.
There she is. Okay. Okay, well, then we have got two of the very best guys that come down and visit you, and I know you know them well. We have got Luke and we've got Nick, and I'm going to let them kind of take over a little bit and let them explain what they're going to be visiting you and talking a lot with you over the next few months.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, representatives, and senators. Really appreciate this opportunity to go over some of the city's priorities briefly as we're on the cusp of the start of the historic 2021 COVID session of the Washington State Legislatures. I'm not sure if we were planning on putting on the screen the excellent PowerPoint that Mike Sugg had created. There we go. That slide, we can blow right past that. And in the best of mnemonic traditions, the agenda priorities of the city form the letters SAM that are in order. State Route 202 congestion relief, and there's a couple projects there that we will highlight in particular. Accessible habitat for native salmon, and that in particular deals with the endangered kokanee, the little red salmon native to Lake Washington. And the M is for more transit options, and we'll dive into that a little more deeply. But next slide, please. Just as some background on State Route 202, obviously a very important corridor on the northern part of the city of Sammamish. A major study was directed to be conducted in 2017 by the legislature about what could be done to improve mobility. WashDOT delivered that study in 2019, and obviously it was a very thorough, comprehensive document, and we won't go through all of it. But there are two projects in particular that rose to the top that we wanted to highlight. The first being the SR 202 Sahalee intersection roundabout. And this was actually the highest scoring project on the midterm strategies covered in the study. And no surprise to anyone that it has a failing level of service during the afternoon peak hour. What the project would entail would be turning the current intersection into a roundabout, and the estimated design cost of that project is $1.6 million, with an estimated range of construction costs of $8.1 to $10.8 million. Now, I know we're in a hurry, but I don't want this just to be a Luke stem winder. So if at any point there are comments or questions, particularly by legislators, please don't hesitate to chime in. I see Senator Mullet has his mic on.
I have it on, but I'm just sitting here. Okay. Sorry. I'll mute myself.
That's quite all right, and questions are welcome later as well. The next project we wanted to highlight, also in the SR 202 corridor, actually located, I believe, just barely outside the city limits, but that impacts the city greatly, is the SR 202 East Lake Sammamish Parkway intersection improvements, which I believe is right about where the Whole Foods is located. This was the highest scoring project on the study's near-term strategies list, and not surprisingly, failing level of service during the afternoon peak hour. What this project would largely entail is relocating a crosswalk, and I believe the current configuration of the crosswalk leads to all four directions of traffic being blocked when that crosswalk is in service, which obviously brings everything to a grinding halt. The design cost for that project is $100,000, with construction, the range of construction costs estimated at $450,000 to $600,000. And so those are the two S's of the SAM agenda. Let's go to the next slide, please, and I will turn the proceedings over to the distinguished gentleman from Tacoma, Mr. Nick Federici.
Thank you, Luke. Pleasure to see everyone tonight, electeds at all levels. The next item on Sammamish's agenda is putting in place a tight line stormwater system under Lake Washington, under East Lake Sammamish Parkway, and would improve water quality, would improve the flow of the water. Again, this is on Zaccoose Creek. Last year, the legislature was generous enough to fund culvert systems on Ebright and George Davis Creek. Zaccoose Creek is almost exactly halfway between those two, and this would be for stormwater to control peak flows and to prevent the erosion that happens if we don't replace it there along the Parkway. And again, it's one of the four creeks to Lake Sammamish where the kokanee spawn, and so it's a particular value to make sure that we protect the flow of water, that we screen out stormwater toxins and other hazards, so that the kokanee can continue to expand its population or turn its population around. You may have seen the article in the Seattle Times last weekend that talked about fragile habitat and the need for improvement of that. This would assist with that. So this is an important item to us. It lies in the 41st legislative district and would be, of course, a capital budget item. So a particular interest to talk to Senators Wellman, Mullet, and Dingra, who all serve on that auspicious body. And so thank you, Senator Dingra. Ashley has been so kind as to already send me the capital request form from your office, and we would ask for you all to help us obtain this funding in the capital budget this year.
And I will retake the baton with the next slide, which is the M of the SAM for the city's priorities. First, the city would love to see some legislation similar to 5896, which Senator Palumbo prime-sponsored in 2019. This would allow private employer shuttles to use park and ride lots, and we can dig into this more further on. I think that the South Sammamish Park and Ride Lot and many other park and ride lots are greatly underutilized, and there's huge first mile, last mile problems with getting people to and from work, especially, and would love to see what we think is an avenue for improving that situation. And the final, if nothing else, we'd love to have the legislators utilize the bully pulpit of their office. The city of Sammamish, the Sammamish Plateau, is a near transit desert. I look at the map for King County Metro Transit, and there's one route, Route 169, Metro 169, that goes down 228th and then the Issaquah Pine Lake Road, and it's really between the Bear Creek Park and Ride Lot and the Issaquah Highlands Park and Ride Lot. That is really the only transit service. So the city is desperate for more options, and so
Luke,
yeah, Representative Sen.
Real quick. The use of the park and ride lots, isn't it the use of the lots just to pick up people, not to necessarily allow them to park in the park and ride lots, or is it to do both?
Exactly. It's the desire to have the private employer shuttles be able to swing in, pick up, and drop people off, and that's what's prohibited under state law now. If a park and ride lot reaches a certain level of capacity, and we think there's some creative things can be done to actually increase the capacity of park and ride lots without any more real estate or pavement being necessary. But it's impossible if we forbid the private employer shuttles from swinging by the park and ride lots.
Right, and again, it's mum on who's parking there, if they're using. I mean, they might have to park elsewhere, but it's just letting them use the pickup area. Okay. Yep.
And I believe that's the last slide, Madam Mayor. So at this point, I think if any of the council members want to highlight any of the agenda, or if the legislators have questions, this would be the perfect time for that.
Go for it, Pam.
Sure. So I would say that on that last question, if people can't park in the park and ride to ride the employer shuttles, I'm not sure how helpful that is. So I'm not sure if we called out what we're specifically asking for, but I think, Luke, you highlighted it, which is it's the last mile problem. So, even if the employer shuttles are allowed to pick people up, that park and ride isn't within walking distance of that many houses. So I think we do want people to be allowed to park there as well.
Yes, and the magic language under state law is reasonable accommodation, which is very familiar to anybody who's familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it would merely require Metro Transit to enter into negotiations with private employers, and any costs they incur would be provided to them. But right now, Metro Transit doesn't even have to make reasonable accommodations, and so they choose not to.
Thanks.
What would the nature of the redesigns of the parking lot, what would be the additional cost incurred if we allowed this?
I'm not sure there would be. The state law does provide that the transit agency is entitled to compensation for any costs that incur. I really think it's just a matter of allowing the vehicles to swing through, the private employer shuttles to swing through the park and ride lot, frankly.
Do you have a sense of how many private shuttles would utilize that if it were available, and how many passenger rides that would accommodate? I mean, you need to get a scale here to make this story sell. You got to pick up enough people to make it matter.
It's a fair question to ask. When we had a public hearing on 5896 a couple of years ago, T-Mobile had a representative who testified strongly in favor of this legislation. And another aspect that needs to be corrected in state law is, of course, we're all familiar with the Microsoft Access vans, and right now state law, allows that for single employers, but there's no provision for multiple employers to combine and share the costs of an employee shuttle. And so I think there's a number of little things we can do, none of which will solve congestion, but it's one of many things we can do to improve the situation, we believe.
Can I ask on the culverts? I know in the 2019 capital budget cycle, two of your culverts kind of made it on a kind of, I guess, competitive list sort of thing. Do you guys have any culverts this time around that made it on that list, or is it just this one?
We did not. As I understood it, we're still progressing through the construction of those and didn't have a specific culvert project ready to go. This Lewis Thompson Road tight line serves the same function, though it isn't exactly a culvert project.
Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
So I think if I can just really quick on that culvert project, it does affect some of our kokanee salmon bearing streams, like Zacchaeus Creek specifically. So without the tight line, we have stormwater that is running off of our streets right now and directly into Zacchaeus Creek. So it's picking up metals as it crosses over Lewis Thompson Road and directly depositing those into Zacchaeus Creek, which ends up in Lake Sammamish.
Okay.
And I don't know if we have one of our fish experts on the line, but I understand that there's actually a hatchery or a facility on Orcas Island where the kokanee salmon, there's a desperate attempt to keep them from becoming extinct in Lake Washington because the situation is dire enough.
I think I saw Danica pop on.
Yeah, hey, Danica, can you respond?
Yes, I was about to say I popped on. I'm sorry, I was a little late. But the mayor is correct about the connection of this project to our other culvert projects in Zacchaeus Creek and the health of kokanee. And yes, you're absolutely right. Because of the kokanee, the depletion in their numbers, one of the initiatives undertaken by the kokanee work group and the partners is paying for this fisheries on Orcas Island, and the fish are literally flown there to sustain the population until these habitat projects can be completed and there's more habitat available to them. So yes, everyone is correct.
There is an incubator specifically on Zacchaeus, though, for kokanee.
Yes, that's right. There's a remote sensing incubator, the RSI, and that is on Zacchaeus Creek to help the kokanee fry imprint on those waters.
We're kind of going backwards again now. Did any of the council members want to comment on either of the SR 202 projects that were at the beginning of the list?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in and speak to this one too. I think this one is critically important for us. Sammamish is an island unto itself. We are disconnected from any state route unless we drive through another municipality or through unincorporated King County. SR 202 feeds 244th, Sahali, and East Lake Sammamish Parkway, which are our only ingress-egress points on the north end of the plateau. So assistance with 202 is critical for us in terms of providing infrastructure to allow for better traffic flow for those who are going to Redmond and or onto 520.
I would also add that this particular intersection at East Lake Sammamish Parkway and 202 will be right by where the light rail station is also going to be at Marymore. So it seems like an opportune time to start planning for any work that's going to happen there, because I'm assuming that it's going to become more of a draw. And so let's kind of get everybody together and let's plan this area in a really smart way and do it once, right?
And who conducted the study? I think, Luke, you started by saying the legislature through DOT funded a study that was done by DOT or DOT consultants.
I believe we have the public works director who can really dive into the weeds, but yes, you all directed, at least those of you who were there in 2017, directed WashDOT to conduct that corridor study. Is the public works director on the line?
Yes, I am. Jeff Ellickish, Public Works Director for City of Sammamish. And he is correct. WashDOT conducted the study with their, I believe they hired consultant resources for this corridor piece. And the City of Sammamish is, even though the project is outside of our boundary again, our commuters who are going and working in Redmond and points beyond heavily use this corridor. So we need to, ideally work to find that partnership to make this happen. And the sooner that can be done and to, become higher on the WashDOT tip list, the better off we're going to be collectively, here. But it was a study that was funded by WashDOT and their resources.
Okay.
One more ad, just for folks, probably, this is obviously more in the 45th, but this particular intersection too, if you do take a look at the study, it's kind of the point of origin of many evils. So it would not only benefit, people who are going to be trying to get to that park and ride or to that light rail station and help folks who are in Sammamish commuting to the north, because East Lake Sammamish Parkway is a big commuter route. People who are coming down Sahalli and 202, and then also points east, right? So this is a bottleneck for anybody who's coming from the east there, and things really start to slow down. In the morning commute, it's a big bottleneck, and then in the evening commute, it is the first problem area when people are trying to get off of 520 and head out to the east. So it just feels like it's the right first place to start to try to make those improvements. And it really feels like we need the state to take the lead on this, because it's got a whole bunch of different people that need to get involved. And so I don't think I can emphasize enough how it could really make improvements for a lot of different jurisdictions, not just Sammamish, if we can really figure out a way to make this work better, not just for the people on the roads, but again, this is potentially about moving some of the crosswalks, but we could make it better and safer for people who are trying to use multimodal transportation as well.
I would agree, and when I apologize, I'm trying to do this from home, and I don't have the best internet. But this is a commute that I do most days, and this is an area where I'm amazed there has not been more accidents. But this is an area where you would see where you're going to see a lot more commutes because of the train not the train, but the light rail that's coming in. But it's also a commute where you see people from Fall City, Carnation, Duval. That whole area is serviced by this intersection too, everybody coming in through 202. So again, Councilmember Stewart's quite accurate by the fact that this is a very heavily utilized intersection.
Okay.
And do we want to go back one more to revisit, however briefly, the Sahalli SR2 intersection roundabout project? Any comments by council members on that one?
This one, again, is one that is heavily utilized, again, by jurisdictions to the east, again, Fall City, Carnation, Duval, anybody traveling on that route. It is also an area that it handles everything coming off of the north end from 244th and 228th. So our two of our three major north end corridors of traffic coming off of the north end. And so this is an area that we've got to keep the flow moving in that area. It is also an area that covers from 244th over to 228th, where you can start seeing there's a small commercial area down there. I don't know why, and it is something that was looked at from the very first Planning Commission and even the PAB, where the city's jurisdiction should have gone north and followed the utility jurisdiction, but that is where commercial and stuff is. So that road takes a lot and should take a lot. It's a state highway, and so you'll see a lot more infill in that area. So this is a place that just screams roundabout, and that is, to me, that is one roundabout that if I don't even like roundabouts, but this is one of two, the other one being the one we just thought that just screams it needs a big roundabout.
I would say I agree with everything the mayor just said. The one thing I will say, though, is if we had to prioritize, I would prioritize the intersection at East Lake Sammamish Parkway and 202, because I do think that even if you fix this roundabout in the mornings, that other intersection causes backup, and it will often back up all the way to this intersection. So in terms of, you know, doing a construction project and having people sort of see the benefit of it, if you fix this and you didn't fix that other one, people might not see the benefits, at least not in the morning. And they're going to be like, why didn't you do all that?
I would agree.
But ideally, we'll do both. And
yes, we want both.
They very much go hand in hand.
On that point, Representative Ty, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, in fact, it's funny because I think Council Member Stewart read my mind. Since I read these two projects, the other one's being identified as a short-term strategy, and this one identifies as a mid-term strategy. And so that was sort of my first questions, and I think Pam sort of alluded to it. My second question is, I'm looking at the construction cost. I'm curious. This is an area I have no clue in, and so I depend on your expertise. I'm curious how many lanes would this roundabout be? Normally, I see them as 2 lanes with potential sort of like right turn type things, because the cost between the two projects in terms of construction relatively different in cost, and so I'm curious why that is the case. If somebody could help answer that question.
I hope Jeff can ride to the rescue.
I will endeavor to do so. Public Works Director, City of Sammamish. The variability in cost comes into refinements and optimizations, and those come with further studies to nail down, you know, the right turn pockets or the outer lane, drop lanes, and those kinds of things that haven't been fully analyzed yet, but they put in variability of project cost to account for that possibility. And so it needs further refinement, but there's a range of costs depending upon the final traffic analysis that needs to occur, the amenities that go into the project, the amount of right-of-way, and also the environmental mitigations that may come with the project, depending upon the amount of impervious areas, those kinds of things. So that's why you'll see a range of cost on a project like this.
Jeff, if I recall correctly, this is also a bit of an interesting roundabout, because the volume of traffic and how it plays out between the morning and the afternoon is really different. So there's not it's not even close to an equal amount of traffic. So, you know, in the mornings you're going to have a lot of coming off of Sahali Way and coming in from the east, and you're going to have almost nobody coming the other direction. And then in the afternoons, everybody's coming the other way. And so there were some fairly complex designs that were proposed for this roundabout. It wasn't just sort of your typical roundabout, so that you could try to keep the free flowing, because this fourth side over here is really just a driveway. And so I think that's part of the complexity too, is it wasn't going to be just your run-of-the-mill roundabout.
The other thing I'll add to that is, as Pam was just mentioning, and Pam, thank you very much for those issues. The complexity of this, to keep it flowing, it might be that we need to signalize a roundabout for those super heavy peaks, and WashDOT is doing that more and more. And during those high peak moments or hours, it seems like, a signal or roundabout. We're actually finding that we can use both tools very, very effectively for these imbalanced or unbalanced situations. So there again, the variability in cost, we need to look at how closely or how we find the tools that we need to use, including, believe it or not, a signalized roundabout, to help make that function as optimally as it can. And therefore, again, the variability in cost.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd.
Can I just add one other thing as a Public Works Director? And that is, I agree with Pam that the first project is hugely important, fixing the crosswalks. And once we fix that, this intersection, if it gets fixed for $10 million or even 12 or 15, whatever the final number really becomes, with inflation and all of that, it has the potential to save the city and the plateau hundreds of millions of dollars, because without it, we have to build the roads wider to hold the cars, because they can't get through this intersection, right? And so it's hugely important that this project, when it's its turn, is highly prioritized, because it has huge benefit for the plateau from an operational standpoint, and it saves the city the undue costs, because if we don't fix it, then we need to make the streets wider in other places and much longer, and those are just huge potential costs to the city. And so I just want to reiterate how important it is that this one also get done. And, when you're prioritizing funding, yes, if we could start the design and get the ball rolling in this session, and then, work towards, the future right-of-way and other phases, this could be a 3 to 6 year time period project, but getting the ball rolling with the initial design dollars, if it could be made to fit, or partnerships possibly formed, to make up a portion of the funding, ought to be contemplated, at least from my perspective, because we've done a lot of partnership projects as well. So just wanted to throw those thoughts and ideas out.
Thanks, everybody. This is Larry. I'm going to have to drop off. I've got another call. You're in good hands, though. I saw my seatmate, Roger Goodman, has arrived, so I'll leave everything to Roger.
Okay. Thank you for coming.
Sure, you bet. Bye-bye.
One of the things I want to add on to what Jeff was saying is one of the things that we've noticed in particular more with COVID is with more and more people being home, is that intersection has become more important for should we have an emergency and need to evacuate the area. We are stuck in a situation where we can't move our traffic. So again, it's another thing where, like you said, if we could get the ball rolling and get something designed, that it's looking more and more important of trying to just get traffic moving to get people out of here. Should we have a situation where we need to do so.
Madam Mayor, I know we also wanted to give time for our local legislators to tell us about, briefly about their priorities for the upcoming session as well. I will also note that Senator Wellman has joined us. So good evening. Thank you very much. Maybe after we have a chance to ask the legislators what they prioritize, we can quickly go back for Senator Wellman's stake to familiarize her with some of these projects. You're on mute, Madam Mayor.
All right, so why don't we go around to, and I'm not going to get used to that. Let's go around and let's hear from our different folks down from Olympia here, and let's hear what you guys are working on. And who wants to go first? Let's not all jump at once here.
Oh, I'm happy to start. Thank you so much for the briefing on that. I am glad that my office has reached out and provided you guys with the paperwork needed to fill out to get this started. So Monica Tingler, and I chair a behavioral health subcommittee. I'm vice chair of law and justice. I sit on Ways and Means, and I'm also the deputy majority leader. So given my committee assignments, I absolutely I'm going to continue to do the work that we're doing in behavioral health to really make sure that we are prepared for the really high need of services that we have seen, especially due to COVID, and continue to see. And really, I know Lisa Callan is here, so I'm sure she'll talk more about the children's mental health, but really making sure we have a concerted effort when it comes to providing care to everyone when they need it, how they need it, and really making sure we're removing barriers. One of my biggest concerns when COVID hit was really making sure that we do not make the mistakes that we did during the last recession, because our behavioral health system, for one, can definitely not take any more cuts to the system. So really making sure we are getting ready for the onslaught of issues in the behavioral health field that we're already seeing. The high rise in the number of individuals struggling, the high rise in our suicide rates is concerning. The criminal justice staff, I'm continuing my work in criminal justice reform. Representative Goodman's here too to talk more about it, and we both have been fairly busy, along with Representative Ramos, dropping bills and working around police accountability issues. I was also fortunate this summer to sit on the special committee on economic recovery in the Senate. It was a bipartisan group, and so really making sure that we are setting up our state the best way possible to recover from what we have been seeing. I will say that as a state, even though we know people are struggling, businesses are struggling, if you look at it nationally, we are a state that has been doing really well. We have one of the lowest death rates. Our economy is doing better than other states. Our budget is in a much better position than other states. So even though these are really hard times, we went into this pandemic with good safety net structures that have really come into play. And so now it's really about making sure that we are coming out of this recovery in a way that makes sense for everybody involved. We had someone testify in our Law and Justice Committee, and I found this just so relevant, and I use it all the time. And she said that the year 2020 has actually given us perfect vision. We have clearly been able to see all the inequities that exist in our society, from access to healthcare, access to education, housing, food, all of it. And now as elected leaders, we really, having seen these inequities so starkly, have to do something to address them. And to me, that is going to be a lot of the focus of the work that we're doing. So thank you for the presentation on City of Sammamish's priorities, and please feel free to reach out anytime on anything that comes up.
I'll pick up after Senator Dhingra. She and I talk about 11 times a day, and I think she and I have our 13th video meeting coming up after this one, at least 12 or 13 a day. It's my great pleasure to represent the better part of Sammamish with Senator Dhingra in the 45th District. Starting my 8th term, so I'm sort of long of tooth. I think I'm the most senior legislator here. That's kind of scary. And I am the chair of the Public Safety Committee and have been for quite a while, and also serve on the Civil Rights and Judiciary Committee, so the criminal and the civil sides of the judicial system. And also serve on the Children, Youth, and Families Committee, which Representative Sen chairs. If you haven't already heard, this is a difficult time to conduct a legislative session, and the logistical challenge is really, because it's going to be a remote session, have forced us to constrain the number of bills that are going to be introduced. We're not going to be setting any records passing bills this year. And yet it's not going to be a session where we simply keep the trains running on time. It's going to be a very progressive, focused session. We're going to be focusing on, as Senator Dhingra said, among other important topics, justice system reform, particularly the questions of racial equity. And so policing reform is a major, what's going to be consuming me as a whole. We have a comprehensive, very impressive package of policing reforms that are going to be going through both the House and the Senate. We've been coordinating closely. Another major topic is the economy, and as we already discussed, we're doing okay, but we don't want to have a kind of a budget that just patches things up. We really want to grow big. We want to come out of this the effect of the pandemic much stronger. Not an austerity budget, but one that will really kickstart us and move us into the future. So the budget and the economic growth is another major priority for us. We're also not going to wait to address the climate crisis. We were choked by acrid smoke this summer. It ruined so many of our days. Could have been beautiful days out there. And it's a reminder that it's not just an aberration, but a trend. It's very troubling. And so we need to take action on climate in many different contexts, including the transportation budget, and obviously environmental legislation itself, clean fuels and so forth, carbon pricing. So that's also a priority. And then the virus itself, COVID, has brought up so many different issues, not just healthcare, but for instance, the impending crisis of evictions and the problems that landlords face, all caused by the pandemic and the economic response. So basically the COVID, the economy, our racial equity and the justice system, and then climate. So we're going to get a lot done, but in a very sort of intense, focused way. My focus is the justice system and be very busy with that. But I'm very hopeful, working with Bill Ramos and with Milan Tai on a team that we've put together on policing policy. And I'm very hopeful we're going to be making our communities safe, upholding the policing profession at the same time, and yet holding accountable those police officers who really do engage in misconduct. So it's a good balance. And it's a pleasure to be here this evening.
I can send to the members of the council the press release today from Representative Goodman and other members of House Democrats that released a package of legislation, I think most or all of which is going to get hearings next week, that also have the endorsement of families and others from affected communities in the police violence situation.
I can follow up. I will go ahead and jump in and share with you this. For this session, I get to be reelected and serve in this capacity as my second term. Is really, really awesome. Unfortunately, I couldn't stay in healthcare and wellness and education in the House. Those two subjects continue to be very important and near and dear to my heart. So we would do it slightly different. Simply in the last sessions, I have learned so much about housing and so much about policy relating to housing. And so for this session, I will be serving as a member in the Housing, Human Services, and Veterans. I continue to serve as a member of Civil Rights and Judiciary. I will be serving in finance, really looking at ways to, as you've heard the previous legislators speaking to our commitment of not cutting services, but looking for ways to ensure that these important services and looking at the City of Sammamish priority, beside the human services, we're looking at building the infrastructure, right? I mean, your roads and your capital projects are all important infrastructure, not only in your state, but in your city, but in the state as well. And so it is the job, at least in the House side of finance, looking for ways to include revenues, rich source for our state. Last but not least, I am honored to be elected as caucus vice chair for the majority caucus in the House to support many important legislative works going forward. And so my top priority, as you know, it has always been the reason why I'm even being in this position is to ensure equity across system. I am a system person. I want to make sure that we are not just massaging the surface of issues, but we look deeply of how we impact system so that when I am no longer here, my children will not have to continue the fight that many of you have fought this fight before me coming into this space, yet we continue doing this. And one of the pieces I talked about is that working on equity issues does not benefit Black and brown and marginalized community. Working on racial equity issues benefit all of us, every single one of us. And that is the reason why I'm committing to that work, whether it's housing or civil rights or judiciary or revenue, all of them need to be based on equity and how we ensure that every single Washingtonian be served. And so whatever legislation that you see me sponsored, that will really be anchored on that very concept of ensuring equity in every single Washingtonian being served.
Can I step in next? I'm so sorry that I was late. Senator Lisa Wellman from the 41st seat May to Milan Tai, and very happy to be here. Finally, to get here. I have the pleasure and the honor of chairing the Early Learning K through 12 Education Committee in the Senate. I'm also on Energy, Environment, and Technology, as well as on Ways and Means. And of course, the matchup between energy, environment, and technology and education this year more than ever, we see the significance of that. I was, when I primed the broadband office bill several years ago, it was because I had been part of the original broadband office, worked with them when I was on the Community Economic Revitalization Board. And it's absolutely essential for economic development. And now overnight, it's also essential for education. And certainly more and more essential, especially for our rural communities, for telehealth, for delivery of telehealth. And we think actually it will be important in terms of, caring for the emotional needs of many of our kids in rural communities, but elsewhere as well, just because there are going to be significant issues there. Primarily starting off with stabilization of our school districts. As you know, we fund school districts by a formula, whether it's for the number of kids that they have or whether it's for their transportation needs. And neither one of those formulas, the formulas that we have, now work. So we have to find another way to help the schools because they didn't stop working. They have got the buses out right away, day one, talking about making sure that kids, who needed meals got meals or educational, materials that the teachers were sending out. They really have continued to communicate across the community. And, we also see that while it's not as though it's easier to try to do what you can do with remote learning. We had many teachers who overnight had to jump into that. And I can only say that they are suffering as much as anybody else in terms of, when you get up every day and you can't do the work that your life's work, and you know how to do it well, and the circumstances are just so frustrating because of a number of things. One is that you may not have had a lot of experience doing digital teaching, remote teaching. Another is that you may be talking to children that halfway through, your time with them, they disappear. They're no longer in front of you. And we're so concerned about what's going on that we can't see. So there's a lot of things that we're working on to address learning loss, because we know that many, many kids have not been thriving in this environment. Some are doing well, thank goodness, but others are not. So very much focused on education K through 12, but also on child care. Who knew or who thought of education as being child care? But when our kids can't go someplace else to our schools because we can't open them, they're in community-based organizations or they are at home. And that certainly is something that we must address quickly. And we lost a lot of our child care marketplace in terms of the numbers of openings that were out there. And so we're focused on that, and I'm very happy to have Senator Claire Wilson, who is partnering with me as the co-chair of early learning, and that's been a background of hers, so she's really on top of that. Definitely, we've seen internet, and internet is spotty. Internet is not everything we want it to be. I was on a Bellevue call the other day. I know some of you may have been tuning into that, where Kim Wyman, as Secretary of State, was talking from Olympia, and she couldn't deliver the message because her internet was so spotty. It was just, you couldn't understand what she was saying. So while we know it's going to be a while till we're every house in our rural communities, what I want to make sure is that we address the inequities today in making sure that where we can reach our kids, in some cases it's a question of that $100 and $110 a month for internet. Parents can't afford to pay it. I don't think the state should be paying for inequity. And so when the state pays for programs that are not robust and kids are on and their internet is crashing, et cetera, not going along with that. I think that that's a major issue. So I'm working on that, on broadband and really focus down on that. I think that we also have to do some reskilling of our workforce. We are in a digital economy. Our economy is based on your ability really to certify and recertify, because credentialing, it's something that constantly takes place. I'm hoping that we'll see more focus on what about those workers who are not able to go back to work. We want them to go into something where they can really have a family wage job and with benefits. That's really important. So, drilling down on that in a number of ways, and then helping small business who were not helped the way they should have been helped. And they didn't get the money, and we really need to make sure. The numbers are horrendous when you look at where the money actually went. One other thing I'll drop for Sammamish. Hey guys, I went out to your water district. We had a big discussion there. I was ready to run the bills. I was ready to do what you asked me to do, and then you pulled back. So let me know. PFAS is an issue. I'm still on top of that. It is something concerning, and I want to make sure we handle it. So please circle back with me about anything that we need to be doing this year, because I haven't heard from you since, oh my God, it seems like 5 years ago, because it was like last year. But it's been intense, people. It really has been. We just didn't stop. So that's some of the things I think that I am focused on. Oh, I do want to mention, we have got a great bill that focuses on creating, for the state of Washington, a cooperative infrastructure bank. And this is a way for us to really leverage some cheap money on behalf of infrastructure for our communities. And I hope that you'll take a look at what we're proposing. We've worked really hard a couple of years on this, a number of our people. It's geared for Washington. It's geared for what we can do for Washington. And we think that this is a real significant part of recovery and certainly can help our small communities. So let's work together on it. Thank you so much.
It occurs to me, this is Lisa Callan, how, listening to my colleagues, how well represented Sammamish is, and the depth of significant subject matter experts that you have that just crosses every field that the legislature addresses. So, yay Sammamish, and yay that I get to be part of this collaborative team that actually brings all of this to bear. You've heard a great deal about, the general priorities of the session, the circumstances of how we're going to show up to do the work and carry all of that forward. So I am very fortunate to be able to partner, with my colleagues and across the aisle in both chambers on the children, youth, and behavioral health aspects of the work that I'm doing. I serve in the Children, Youth, and Families Committee on the House, and along with Representative Sin and Roger Goodman, and very fortunate to do that work. And the summer I took over as co-chair of the Children, Youth, Behavioral Health Work Group, along with the Healthcare Authority, and we did a deep dive and a lot of work and have several recommendations that we'll be bringing to bear through legislation, and I'll be kind of orchestrating that. Some of the work will be mine, and some of them will be partnered out with some of my colleagues to move the dial on that. A lot of that has to do with building workforce in behavioral health, making sure that we've got standards of care that's directly related to how our youth from prenatal through the young adult age of 25 get services and care. Also responding to the increase of need that has shown itself in the pandemic around trying to increase mobile crisis response in units and what that looks like. And then there's a significant amount of work that's being built out through a couple of my colleagues around trying to make sure that the state is ready to build a much more robust system around the up and new coming 988 program. I know Senator Dinger is deeply in that work and greatly appreciate that. I was on a call earlier today where we had behavioral health stakeholders. It was over 100 people, I think, on the call that are deeply involved in it. I think, Nick, you were on that. I think I saw as well. Yeah, engaged in the work and what's happening. And it's as the need has arisen, and as I think somebody mentioned the 20/20 eyesight that we have now on some of this and what we need to do from an equity lens, which bridges the gap of broadband, telehealth, as well as all of these other services and how we deliver that. I think that hopefully we'll see a lot of great traction there. One of the areas that I try to intersect is the early learning space, and we heard about some of that work coming from Senator Wellman and Senator Wilson in the partnership with Representative Sen, and trying to make sure that we have a very foundational early learning and child care space that are coming. I think you'll see some big work there and helping on the policy side with that work on the House. And then also trying to intersect the behavioral health elements along with our K-12 space. So I get to work with Senator Wellman on education on the House side and trying to figure out the budget stabilization work, so doing some work with that, as well as trying to figure out how to create some more flexibility in the dollars that are coming to our districts. So in their local decisions that they have more tools in their toolbox to look at what that means. And that includes also the work that we need to do for our youth that are incarcerated and our youth that are involved in the welfare system. They certainly are not the winners in the pandemic and all that's been happening. So we're trying to understand how to really respond to their needs and a broken system that it was before, but making sure that we're trying to figure out how to work the inequities there as well. And then this year, going into this session, I will remain one of the vice chairs in capital on the House side. So to note your capital request, but very interested in continuing to do that work and support it from the range of infrastructure build out of what we need to do, not only for Culverts and our little red fish friends that we love so dearly, in our area in the 5th and the 41st and the 45th, but also around our affordable housing, around our early learning facilities, making sure that we have what we need in our school constructions, and you'll see some legislation moving forward around making sure that we've got our schools tested to make sure we have acceptable levels of lead in our water, all kinds of things on that regard. So looking forward to that expanse, and definitely looking forward to using the capital budget as a great economic stimulus to see if we can really amp up some job opportunities and work around that space as well. So that's some of the areas that I'm at, and I'm sure that my seatmate, Representative Ramos, will tell you all about the great things, transportation and all things the good there.
Great. Thank you, Rep. Callan. And jumping in here, we are trying to put definitely a social justice and equity face on so many things we do this year. I'm very lucky. I worked directly with Senator Dinger on a bill that we just dropped this week, and we have a hearing next week, and on Chair Goodman's team that we've been working on through this session, and now on his Public Safety Committee as well, doing a lot of work, and a lot more information will be coming about about that shortly, and all the police reform and criminal justice stuff that's being done. The other piece I'll take on, is transportation. I'm vice chair on the Transportation Committee, and been working all the last 6-8 months on putting together a transportation package. There'll be a press release coming out in a couple of weeks on the 19th on what's going to be involved in that. Interestingly enough, we put a social justice and equity face on our transportation package, trying to make sure that transportation gets to the communities that have historically been underserved from transportation, or have actually taken the brunt of the not so good effects of some of our transportation projects. So that'll be coming out, and we'll be working strongly on that in those pieces as we work towards that. The other piece that also is interesting is I'm still on this year the natural resources and rural development piece, and I've got a bill coming in there that's talking about what we call urban forestry and community forest development. Now that is very critical to our cities in this district and area, because as having been an Issaquah City Council member and working with you, many of our cities in this area own a fair amount of open space, green space, and forest that we were smart enough and wise enough to pick up over time to keep some of those spaces within our cities. But the one thing that many cities don't have is forest management skills. You tend to have park skills and those kinds of things. So this bill is designed to help bring that expertise to our small cities in particular, and community forests next to our cities and underserved areas within our cities that don't have those open spaces. We need to develop those things. And it's a package to help get the technical expertise to share, predominantly from agencies such as our Department of Natural Resources that have those kinds of skills, and share them with our local municipalities to help those places stay good for the next 200, 300, 400 years. Because what happens is when we acquire those, we don't think about, we get them and we're so happy we just let them sit there. We don't realize if we just let them sit there 100, 200 years from now, which is what we want, they're not going to be as healthy and taken care of as they could be if we don't pay attention to them now. So that's my piece on the climate change. Tends to be in the natural resource side, so working a lot there on climate change, transportation, and police reform, and always with all our local issues as well. So I noted, of course, your projects in transportation, and we'll be talking about those in many ways as we fit those in. Pay attention. Like I say, that package will be coming out in 2 weeks. It will become public, and there will be a lot of discussion about that. So feel free to reach out to me or anybody else on that team that is going to have input on how that package develops. There'll be a lot of talk about transportation because I think there's going to be a couple other transportation package proposals besides this one coming from the House, and maybe a couple coming from the Senate. So it's going to create a lot of talk. But one thing I look at transportation as also as an economic stimulus. You know, when we are building projects, we're putting more money into our infrastructure. We're creating jobs in our community. That's an important thing to help our economy recover as well. So that's the other piece we put into all this work as well, trying to see what we can do to get our economy going as quickly as possible. And I'll wrap it up there because we're already over. And I see Luke, and I can see the top of that. That looks like an older Hawk shirt. Is that right? There you go. All right, a day early. Love it, my man.
The Holmgren era, the kind of the steel blue color.
There you go.
Well, I want to thank all of you. I've seen a few of our council members that are here, and so I'm just going to shout out to them for Councilmember Pam Stewart and Councilmember Cantrine. I see Councilmember Ross, who I don't see his picture up, but he is here with us this evening. And then myself, I am the current mayor, Karen Moran, and I remember I was down talking about PFAS a few years ago, and so I will be back probably complaining about that again, and I will be putting a call into you, Mr. Ramos, because, you know, I have a few issues that I wanted to talk to you about. So, you know, and it's good to see everyone. I know it's a crazy time of year, so I thank every one of you for taking the time and visiting with us this evening and hearing the issues for Sammamish. And I look forward to working with every one of you. So if you have any questions, feel free to call any one of the council members, and Luke and Nick will be there to, you know, answer anything they can.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank
All right,
you.
Karen, we'll talk soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.